left to burn in the fire, she rose from the ashes with a secret no one expected. The night was alive with fire. It started with a whisper, a hiss of smoke curling beneath a doorframe, unnoticed at first, harmless like a breath of dust. But then came the crackle, sharp and hungry, like the snapping of brittle bones. The flames caught fast, leaping from timber to timber, licking walls and dancing across ceilings like they were born to destroy. Outside, the wind howled, fanning the blaze into a monster with 1,000 tongues, each one thirsting for more. Inside, the heat was unbearable. It pressed down like an iron hand, sucking the air from the lungs, boiling the sweat before it could drip. The scent of burning wood clashed with something more sinister, melted plastic, scorched fabric, and the acrid bite of charred memory. The darkness pulsed red and gold, shadows warping across collapsing walls and furniture consumed in seconds. Somewhere within the inferno, there was movement, a figure crawling, staggering, reaching for something, anything, through the choking smoke. She didn't scream. There was no one to hear, and she'd long since learned that screams only fed the fire. Instead, she pushed forward, her skin blistering, her breath shallow, her world a blur of orange and black. The flames closed in, a circle of judgment, and somewhere between survival and surrender, her mind slipped away. No one came for her. They had already decided she was gone. A tragic accident, they would say. A casualty of carelessness, maybe even her own. But it wasn't an accident. Not to her. She remembered now, the locked door, the missing phone, the deliberate silence before the smoke. They thought she wouldn't survive. And maybe a part of her didn't. But something else did, something forged in the fire, something patient and hidden, waiting to rise. What came back wasn't what anyone expected. Before the fire, her life moved in quiet circles, like ripples in a still pond. The town of Gracelake was the kind of place that never made the news, tucked between tree-lined hills and surrounded by fields that whispered in the wind, a town that seemed preserved in amber. People waved at each other from their porches, gossiped over pies at the diner, and locked their doors more out of habit than fear. On the surface, it was idyllic. Beneath, it pulsed with secrets like blood under skin. She lived with her family in a white farmhouse at the edge of town, its paint peeling and shutters crooked, but always immaculate inside. Her mother, Ruth, kept the home like it was a temple, orderly, spotless, silent. Her father, Warren, a stern man with silver at his temples and ice in his gaze, ruled with discipline cloaked in calm. To outsiders, they seemed like a model family. But inside those walls, warmth was rare, and love was something rationed. There was a brother, too, James, older by 3 years and always distant, as if he lived 1 foot out the door. He had a charming smile and a darkness behind it, the kind that made people trust him even when they shouldn't. He was the town's golden boy, the one everyone believed in, the one who always knew how to twist a situation in his favor. And she was the quiet one, the girl in the background, always obedient, always watching. At school, she was polite, soft-spoken, forgettable. Her teachers liked her well enough, but no one really knew her. Not even her closest friend, Maddie, a girl full of sunshine and noise, who often said she felt like her best friend kept half her soul hidden. She wasn't wrong. Because even then, long before the smoke and the flames, the girl felt it, that something wasn't right. Sometimes, she'd find things moved in her room, though no one admitted to it. Notes missing. The phone line mysteriously dead. Her diary read and closed wrong. Whispers behind closed doors that stopped the moment she entered. Then one night, as the wind rose and the trees clawed at her window, she caught a glimpse of her brother slipping out of the house with something hidden under his coat. She watched him vanish into the woods without a sound. And in that moment she knew, whatever peace she'd believed she had was only ever smoke. The night of the fire began like any other, quiet, unassuming, the kind of stillness that always came before a storm. She'd fallen asleep early, curled beneath the worn quilt her grandmother had stitched long ago. The house had been silent, save for the ticking clock in the hallway and the faint creak of wood settling with age. But something stirred her from sleep. A smell. Wrong. At first, she thought it was a dream. Then the heat hit her, thick and suffocating. Her eyes flew open, and what she saw made her heart seize. Flames were licking up the hallway outside her door, dancing like serpents along the walls. The air was already heavy with it, black smoke curling beneath the doorframe like fingers reaching inside. She jumped out of bed, coughing hard, her lungs already burning. Panic clawed its way into her chest. She reached for the doorknob, but it was scalding. She yanked her hand back with a hiss and turned toward the window, only to realize it had been nailed shut. Not locked. Her stomach dropped. No one nailed windows shut. Not unless they wanted someone to stay inside. She stumbled back, dread flooding her veins with ice. She called out for her family, for anyone, but the only answer was the roar of the fire and the groan of wood warping under pressure. She tried her phone. She remembered charging it. She always did. It was never dead. Something wasn't right. This wasn't an accident. Someone had made sure she wouldn't get out. Desperate, she grabbed a chair and hurled it at the window. Twice. On the third hit, the glass shattered, slicing through her arm, but she didn't stop. She clawed at the boards with bleeding hands, tearing splinters loose until one gave way. Through the gap, cool air rushed in, and she forced herself through, her body scraping against the jagged edges. She dropped to the ground below with a sickening thud, her breath ragged, blood trailing down her arm, pain flaring in her ankle. But she was alive. The fire raged behind her, lighting up the night sky like a second sun. Her home, her life, burned, and no one came running. She crawled into the woods, hidden by darkness and smoke, while behind her, the town watched from a distance and whispered, she didn't make it. But they were wrong. She had survived. They just didn't know what she'd become. She woke in darkness. The pain came first, a deep, throbbing ache in her limbs, the sharp sting of raw skin, and the pulsing burn of every breath she drew. Her throat felt scorched, her lips cracked, and her vision swam with shadows and flickers of dim orange light. For a moment, she thought the fire had followed her, that she'd somehow died and carried the flames with her into whatever came next. Then the haze cleared, and she saw a ceiling made of old wood beams above her, a low-hanging lantern casting a dull glow. A blanket covered her body, coarse but warm, and she lay on a cot in a small, unfamiliar room that smelled of earth, herbs, and faint smoke. She tried to sit up, but her muscles screamed in protest. A voice stopped her. "Easy. You're safe. For now." The stranger stepped from the shadows. An older woman, face lined by time and weather, with eyes like stone, unyielding, but not unkind. She moved with purpose, carrying a basin and cloth, and began cleaning the blood and soot from the girl's arms without waiting for permission. "You were half dead when I found you near the tree line. Been out for 2 days. 2 days. The fire. The betrayal. The window." She remembered it all in a rush that stole her breath. The woman watched her, understanding flickering across her face but asking no questions. Later, alone and trembling, she broke. The tears came fast, silent and relentless. Everything she'd known, her home, her family, her sense of safety, was gone. Burned to ash. And worst of all, she knew someone had meant for it to happen. She would stay hidden. Let them believe she died in that fire. Because in the fire, she'd seen something, heard something. A truth buried deep in the flames. And now she carried it like a spark, waiting for the right moment to ignite. The secret had come to her in fragments, pieces she hadn't fully understood in the chaos of the fire. But now, as her body slowly healed and her mind cleared, the truth unraveled like a knot she'd been blindly pulling at for years. She remembered the folder, half buried in her father's desk drawer, exposed only because the fire had blown the drawer open when the wood splintered. She hadn't meant to see it, hadn't been looking for anything, but the flames had a way of revealing what people tried hardest to hide. As she stumbled through the smoke, disoriented and desperate, the contents spilled out across the floor. And in those blurred, terrified seconds, her eyes had caught something, a name. A signature. A check. It didn't make sense at first. But over the days that followed, hidden away in the cottage of the stranger who called herself Marion, she began to piece it together. Her father hadn't just been the cold, controlling patriarch of a quiet family. He'd been part of something bigger. Something darker. Land deals, hush money, forged signatures. And her brother, James, he was in it too. The golden boy, the one who could do no wrong? He'd helped cover it up. Helped ensure certain people disappeared or stayed quiet. Including her. The fire hadn't just been a punishment. It had been a silencing. She knew too much. Or they thought she might. The weight of it crushed her. There were moments she nearly told Marion, but something always stopped her. The woman had saved her life, yes, but could she be trusted? This secret, if spoken aloud, had the power to ruin lives. The town of Grace Lake wasn't as innocent as it appeared, and if she exposed the truth, she would unravel everything. The lie of her family, the illusion of the town, the reputation of people who would do anything to protect themselves. She wanted to run, disappear, start over. But the fire had taken everything from her, except this secret, and it burned hotter than any flame. Revenge whispered in her ear like a siren, but justice pulled harder. She stood at the edge of herself, scarred and quiet, staring out over the treetops. The world thought she was dead. That was her power now. She would use it, and when she returned, it wouldn't be as the girl they tried to erase. It would be as the reckoning they never saw coming. She shed her old self like scorched skin. Gone was the girl with the soft voice and wide eyes, the one who kept her head down and followed rules. In her place, she crafted someone new, someone invisible, untraceable, free. Marion helped, guiding her through the transformation like a sculptor with clay. They cut and dyed her hair until she barely recognized her reflection. She chose a new name, Elena Cole. It tasted unfamiliar at first, but soon it became armor. With her face altered, her records burned, and no trace of her existence left behind, she re-entered the world as a ghost. She left the forest under the cover of night, disappearing into cities where no one asked questions. The internet became her battlefield. She traced property records, financial trails, and old connections. She found whispers of her father's company embedded in shell businesses. She discovered James's name attached to transactions that never should have happened. She moved with care, never too close, never too bold. She kept her distance, even when the fury inside begged her to crash through their polished facades and scream the truth. Her every step was measured, quite precise. But staying in the shadows wore on her. She ached to confront them, to speak her name and watch their faces twist in disbelief. Still, she reminded herself, patience. That was her power now. Then came the letter. No return address. No signature. Just a single sheet with 5 words scrawled across it. I know what you saw. Her breath caught. It could have been a threat, or a signal. She thought of Maddie. Of the girl who once swore she knew something was wrong. Could it be her? Or had someone found her already? Ally or betrayer, someone else was awake now. And the game had begun. Elena moved like a shadow, weaving her way back into the town's orbit without ever crossing its borders. Every name she remembered, every face tied to her old life, was now a thread in a web she was determined to untangle. She started with the outer circles, former acquaintances, distant family friends, people who once hovered at the edges of her parents' world. With a false identity and clever questions, she played a part, curious in turn, journalist in training, corporate investigator. People talked. They always did when they thought you were nobody. What she found chilled her more than the fire ever had. It wasn't just the bribes or the forged land deals. It wasn't even the fact that James had known about the fire before it happened. It was how many others had known too, and said nothing. Teachers. Local officials. Her father's business partners. A network of silence stretched across Grace Lake like rot beneath painted walls. She confronted Mr. Haver, the town's longtime accountant, a man who'd once scolded her for forgetting a decimal in math class. He looked at her, recognizing something in her eyes, even if her name and face were changed, and went pale. In whispered gasps, he admitted to falsifying documents at her father's request. He said it was for the good of the town, he stammered. Said it had to be done. But then there was that night, and no one asked questions. The real shock came from someone she never expected to help her. Leah, a girl who had bullied her in high school. They'd never been friends. never exchanged anything but cold stares and biting comments. But when Elena, under her new name, cornered Leah in a bar outside town and started digging, something shifted. "I knew they were lying about you," Leah said after a long silence. "I saw James that night. He had your bracelet. Said he found it in the woods. But he was too calm. Too clean. I didn't believe him." Elena's heart twisted at the memory. Her bracelet, a gift from her grandmother, the only thing she wore every day. She'd lost it while crawling through the brush. He'd found it. He'd kept it. As she pieced together more of the puzzle, she faced questions she hadn't prepared for. What if exposing the truth destroyed people who were only partially guilty? What if vengeance swallowed her whole? But the lies had taken too much already. And now, the truth was demanding its turn. Elena returned to Grace Lake under a rain-heavy sky. The same streets stretched before her like a ghost town dressed in nostalgia. The town hadn't changed much, fresh coats of paint over the same cracks, newer cars in old driveways. But beneath it all, the rot was still there, festering in polite smiles and whispered alliances. No one recognized her. Not yet. She moved carefully, slipping into meetings, town halls, and public forums, planting seeds and watching them grow. A letter here, a file left anonymously on someone's desk, a whispered conversation in a coffee shop with a reporter who owed her nothing but smelled a story. The documents she'd gathered, the proof of illegal land transfers, manipulated zoning laws, payoffs buried in falsified charity funds, began to surface. People grew restless. Conversations turned sharp. The illusion of perfection started to crack. She watched James from a distance, polished and smiling, as if his sins didn't stain his breath. Her father, less visible these days, still pulled strings behind closed doors. But they were off balance now. They knew something was coming. They just didn't know it was her. Then someone tried to shut her down. Her hotel room was ransacked. Her burner phone vanished. A message was left on the mirror, scrawled in soap. "Stop digging, or you'll burn again." The threat didn't scare her. It confirmed she was close. She wasn't hiding anymore. She was hunting. At the town's upcoming Founders Gala, an event thick with politics and pride, she would strike. She had timed everything, the public leaks, the documents, the witnesses ready to speak. They wanted to bury the truth. But now it clawed its way to the surface, dirty and screaming. The reckoning was no longer a whisper. It was a storm on the edge of breaking. The Founders Gala shimmered with elegance, gilded lights, polished speeches, and the town's finest parading pride like armor. Elena stood among them in a black dress that whispered confidence, her eyes calm, unblinking. No one recognized her, not until it was too late. James was at the podium, his voice smooth as ever, spinning half-truths into applause. Her father stood beside the mayor, quiet, calculating. All the faces from her past smiled under the weight of secrets. She stepped forward. "This town is built on ashes," she said, voice ringing through the hall like a bell tolling the end. "And I know who set the fire." Gasps rippled. Silence dropped like a curtain. James froze mid-sentence. Her father's face went pale. Then she unveiled it, on the projector, emails, signatures, hidden accounts, and photographs. Proof of everything. The illegal land deals, the silenced opposition, the plan to remove her when she got too close. Her voice trembled only once when she played the audio. James and her father, recorded the night before the fire, discussing how she couldn't be trusted anymore. The room fractured. People shouted. Some left. Some cried. The truth burned brighter than the chandeliers above. James lunged at her, words forgotten, fists clenched, but she stepped back. Security swarmed. He was dragged away screaming, the golden boy shattered. Her father? He didn't fight. He just stared at her, eyes filled with something unreadable, rage, maybe. Or regret. He collapsed moments later, the weight of exposure more than he could carry. Outside, someone had set fire to her car. A warning or revenge, she didn't care. She watched it blaze from the steps of Town Hall, orange dancing in her reflection. This fire didn't scare her. It couldn't consume her. Because now, everyone saw her. And she no longer burned. She burned them. The town of Gracelake would never be the same. In the weeks following the gala, the truth spread like wildfire, no longer rumors, but documented facts broadcast on the news and dissected in courtroom testimonies. Arrests were made. Resignations followed. The town council fractured under scrutiny. Businesses shuttered. Families who'd once lived under a comforting illusion now saw the cracks running through their history. Some called her a liar. Others, a savior. But no one could ignore her anymore. Elena didn't stay to bask in the chaos. That wasn't what this was about. She gave her final statement to the press under her new name, her identity still guarded by legal threads and the threat of retribution. She appeared calm, composed, and unshakable. Then she left. No tearful farewells. No triumphant goodbyes. Just a long stretch of highway and the quiet hum of possibility. The forest that had once hidden her felt distant now, a place of pain and rebirth she'd never forget. Her scars, visible and not, remained, but they no longer held power over her. They were reminders, not anchors. She stopped once at the edge of a cliff overlooking the valley. The morning sun spilled over the hills like forgiveness. She inhaled the cool air, her lungs unburdened for the first time in a long while. Somewhere out there, a new life waited. Maybe it would be quiet. Maybe not. She didn't need all the answers now. What mattered was that she'd faced the fire, more than once, and walked through it. Not as the girl they tried to silence, but as the woman they would never forget. And as she stepped into the dawn, something flickered in her eyes. Not vengeance. Not sorrow. Just freedom. And the whisper of a future still unwritten.